Tonight on Bridge City News, police are still searching for 2 teenagers suspected in the murder of 3 people. Their efforts have taken them to northern Manitoba. A man who rode his bike 8,000 kilometers across the country raising awareness for Alzheimer's is back in Lethbridge. We caught up with him to talk about his journey. And thousands of people are converging on Henderson Lake this weekend as Ribfest has arrived.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge firefighters and police were called out to a house fire earlier this afternoon at the 2400 block of 7th Avenue North.
Crews were presented with thick black smoke, heavy heat when they gained entry into the front door, and there was visibility was very minimal, if any at all, and so multiple reports also of explosions. So trying to figure out exactly what was exploding.
Got my dogs out, got everybody out, a couple more explosions on the way out. I don't really know what to say, but I think they might have been cooking something in there, like drugs.
The girl at the house who, when she admitted that, she was like, oh, I'm the one, like, I lit the candle, and as soon as she realized, like, oh crap, like, I'm saying all this, they left. Like, they just ran, and then she fell, and...
We'll have more information on social media as soon as it becomes available. Do you remember when former Transportation Minister Brian Mason announced that Lethbridge would be receiving $100 million towards the replacement of the Highway 3 bridge? Well, it turns out it may not be a done deal after all. The current UCP government is reviewing all of the previously promised funding from the NDP government, including the $100 million towards the new bridge. The current Transportation Minister, Rick McIver, says the $100 million was not included in the UCP budget. He did say, however, that the project will be considered as part of the overall capital planning process. The government is currently doing a review of our province's finances. The report should wrap up by August 15th. So we reached out to the City of Lethbridge for comment, and here's what we received in a statement. The replacement of the Highway 3 eastbound bridge not only improves traffic capacity and the safety of motorists, but it'll also give us the opportunity to provide a second cycling and multi-use pathway. The Southside Tourist Information Centre has moved. The new location will be at Scenic Drive and Mayor McGrath. Those that are new to our city can find out what Lethbridge has to offer when it comes to attractions. There will also be a playground, washrooms, and a Sandy Flush station for RVs. Tourism Lethbridge says the facility will remain open from 9 till 5 p.m. until the end of September. It was a ride to remember for a University of Lethbridge professor. He just returned from an 8,000-kilometer bike ride across Canada. As Jeanette Rocher reports, he did it to raise awareness for Alzheimer's.
It took 11 weeks, 8,000 kilometers, and 2 flat tires to do it. But Richard LaRouche is finally back in Lethbridge after accomplishing a trip of a lifetime.
Yes, so I left Lethbridge on May 9th, and I traveled east all the way to St. John's, Newfoundland, and then I flew to Victoria, BC to do across BC last.
The University of Lethbridge professor, who's originally from Quebec, rode all across Canada all by himself to raise awareness and money for a disease that affects his family.
Both of my grandmothers had Alzheimer's, a lot of uncles and aunts and great-uncles, great-aunts.
He raised $3,000 for Alzheimer's, and Sherry Remus from the Alzheimer's Society was there to greet him.
Currently, right now, there are over 565,000 Canadians who have it, but 3 out of 4 people will be affected by it. I can't believe that Richard did this, and he did it all unsupported. He just got on his bike and he rode for 8,000 kilometers to raise money for Alzheimer's research.
LaRouche had to carry about 50 pounds of equipment and personal items with him. He didn't always have a proper place to sleep at night, so his tent came in handy, and it wasn't until the last leg of his journey that gave him the most challenge when he got his second flat tire.
I wanted to inflate the tire, but it seemed that my pump was not working.
He ended up getting a ride back into Lethbridge Thursday night, but still plans to go back and finish the last 65 kilometers.
I have the personal satisfaction of doing the whole thing on my bike.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Rocher.
Just 4 months ago, Kevin Costner and Diane Lane were in town of Fort Macleod filming the major motion picture Let Him Go. This summer, Paul Rudd will be in the small town with a big heart filming the brand new Ghostbusters movie. Ainsley O'Reilly explains how excited one group from Lethbridge is.
The movies are nostalgic, the music is iconic, and the stories are a timeless joy for all ages. Ghostbusters. The Lethbridge Ghostbusters have combined their love for the franchise and charity.
I started out actually helping out with a children's festival last year up at the exhibition, and we raised some money for the Bikers Against Child Abuse and for the school system that we, the school program that we help out with the school system there.
The group is a combination of a few families and volunteers. The new Ghostbusters movie is set to film in Fort Macleod next month. The Martin family is ecstatic.
Excited, very excited. I've been actually hyper about it. If it was in between 1 and 10, it would be like a 10.
I want to go there, even if it's a little tire shop or ice cream shop or whatever they got going. I don't care. I just want to get a picture there and say I was on the set.
Captain Marvel star McKenna Grace, Stranger Things actor Finn Wolfhard, and Paul Rudd are all notable characters. As for the details, well, we'll have to wait and see.
I'm kind of under lock and key with regard to the release of information. So, we just encourage people to come out and watch, and it will be, for those that have watched Ghostbusters 1 and 2, there was tons of special effects, and I do know there will be a lot of special effects shot here in the town of Fort Macleod.
A meeting will take place in council chambers at the G.R. Davis Admin Building from 7 to 8 p.m. on August 1st. Although they aren't looking for background actors and actresses, their main focus is security, making sure that folks coming in and out of town are respecting the crew and making sure that everyone is safe. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Grab your bibs and your wet wipes and head on down to Henderson Lake Park. Rib Fest is back in town, and for the first time, it's being put on by Lethbridge Rotary. Award-winning rib shacks from Oklahoma, Michigan, and several spots across Canada have taken part in a cross-Canada tour of festivals celebrating the famous dish.
We got ribs, we got chicken. Come on down, folks, it's finger licking.
So we have a massive beer gardens that is minor approved, so you can grab your food, come in there, get a cold beverage, listen to some music. We have the Atco stage east of the beer gardens. There's a huge fun zone for all the kids. We have Feed Sam here, and they're setting up a watering station for your pups. This is a family event. You got to bring your dogs, and then they'll be able to get a drink, stay cool over there. Cooper Rentals, they have a air conditioning unit, so we can stay cool with them. So it's free admission, and we also have free parking at Exhibition Park. So go over there, find a spot, walk into the parks. Family fun for everyone.
Ribfest runs today through Sunday. The Lethbridge Baseball AAA Under-13 Bisons will be representing Team Canada and are well on their way to the Little League World Series in Livermore, California. Their first game is coming up this Sunday, 12 p.m. against Latin America. Good luck going out to our local ball players. Many people believe that only the rich become richer at the expense of others. Now, this worldview is also called zero-sum thinking, because people who believe this way regard economic life as a zero-sum game, kind of like tennis where one player has to lose for another person to win. So we asked an economics professor, do the rich get richer at the expense of the poor?
That's not generally true. It's true in a situation where you have a finite size of an economy or income that isn't growing over time. If it's a fixed amount and you've got the same number of people sharing that, one person can only gain if someone else loses. However, economies generally and societies in generally have aggregate income, aggregate real income growing over time. So some individual can actually gain amounts without anyone losing. It would mean the distribution of income is different, but any one individual could maintain the same level of real income, so they're not losing anything. But others, because of maybe productive activity they engaged in, were able to obtain a bigger share of a bigger pie.
Many Albertans have used payday loan lenders, especially when so many of us run out of money before the end of the month. Brian Dykema is a program director with Cardis, and he says there can be some serious issues when you go to those lenders for money.
But the real challenge is not the interest rate. It is bad, but it's not the real interest rate. It's the fact that you have to pay that all back at once in one big payment. And that's the challenge, right? So if you and I are stuck for cash flow on Thursday, The fact that we're paying $345 rather than $369 doesn't really deal with the issue, which is that big $300 chunk.
Catch the full interview with Brian Dykema discussing the pros and cons of payday loans coming up after business news. As we head towards the federal election this fall, Conservative MPs are continuing to criticize the Liberals for a series of alleged cover-ups and interference in the judicial process, including the expulsion of former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould. Tory MP Lisa Raitt also brought up the leak of information from a Supreme Court appointment process.
Once again, we are seeing Justin Trudeau's attempt to silence people as they try to talk about things that are happening. First, we started with Jody Wilson-Raybould. When she decided that she was going to speak up, she was first confronted with malicious rumors about her. And then secondly, we had to deal with a leak of confidential information from a Supreme Court appointment process. And ironic that we're here today talking about the process again. We also had a situation most recently where David Mulroney, former ambassador to China, as well as Guy Saint-Jacques, as well, a former ambassador to China, have both indicated that they have received telephone calls from the Prime Minister's office on behalf of the Prime Minister's office through Global Affairs Associate Deputy Minister, asking them to vet their comments regarding China in order to ensure that everybody was on the same page because, of course, we're in an election period. I would say that this is an issue that has not been put to bed, and we've been shut down every single time by the Justice Committee, so people are engaged. They want to know what happened, and they are very concerned, and I don't believe that they trust this Prime Minister, and they certainly are concerned the fact that we see Mr. Butts coming back as if nothing happened, and Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott are running as independents.
A hamlet located 200 kilometers north of Edmonton is under an evacuation order due to flooding. An emergency alert has been issued for the municipal district of Lesser Slave River number 124 due to heavy rainfall. It says the Martin River is rising because of the rain and is flooding the hamlet of Martin Beach. The alert says Highway 88 is washed out north of the hamlet and it's closed. The massive wildfire which forced thousands of people from their homes in northern Alberta is now classified as being held. The province says the Chuckhead Creek fire is not expected to grow given current boundaries and weather conditions. Officials do say, however, a large firefighting operation will continue because parts of the fire within those boundaries may grow. The province says teams from around 30 communities in Alberta, along with help from other countries, have been helping to battle the blaze, which at one point was over 350,000 hectares in size. The manhunt continues for two teenagers accused in the killing of 3 people. Police are now focused on the wet, thick forests of northeastern Manitoba for the 2 teenagers who've been on the run. Officers from the western provinces and Ontario are in Gillam searching for 19-year-old Cam Macleod and 18-year-old Briar Schmigelski. They are charged with second-degree murder in the death of one man and are the suspects in the fatal shootings of a young tourist couple in BC. RCMP say they are confirmed sightings of the teams on Monday, just prior to a burned SUV which was discovered in the Gillam area.
At this point in the investigation, we believe they are still in the area. Manitoba RCMP has deployed a significant amount of resources to the Gillam area, including our emergency response team, our crisis negotiation team, police dog services, and air services assets. The RCMP Major Crime Unit is involved, as well as the RCMP's North District and RCMP resources from other provinces. Our officers have conducted detailed and thorough searches of potential areas of interest, and these searches continue. Over the last 48 hours, we have received over 80 tips, and we continue to ask the public to remain vigilant for Cam Macleod and Briar Schmigelski.
The commanding officer of the RCMP in Alberta has apologized for how the force handled the 2010 disappearance and death of Amber Takara. Her body was found in the bush around Edmonton 2 years after she got into a car of an unknown man for a ride into the city. Her family rejected the apology, questioning its sincerity.
As of right now, the apology doesn't mean anything to me because they did it because they were told to. And I think the reason that I'm up here today, Amber's mother, is because I didn't give up. I don't know where I got the strength from, but I'm here. It hurts me that Amber gets all the attention today, where there's so many of our missing and murdered women. And Amber gets a new poster because the police messed up. Does that solve the problem? No. I hope that I help families today, even if one family, that I can give them the strength to come forward and not give up like I did. But you can't. That's your daughter, that's your baby. So to the mothers of the missing and murdered, please, please, find the strength and come forward. And you've been wronged, like Amber's case was, come forward. An apology needs to be heartfelt, not just words.
19 people have died in Costa Rica from alcohol that was tainted with toxic levels of methanol. The Ministry of Health issued the national warning. Of 34 people who have been poisoned, 14 of those aged 37 to 72 died in the first week of June. Police say they do not know how much alcohol has been tainted, but now confiscated 30,000 bottles during their countrywide investigation. Police in Los Angeles say a man shot and killed his father, brother, and 2 other people during a 12-hour rampage across the San Fernando Valley.
As we said over the course of the day, hey, we knew who the suspect was. That information had been provided to you, and we've attempted to locate him. Investigators were able to locate him at 1400 hours or 2 o'clock this afternoon at Canoga and Galt. Plainclothes investigators were able to identify him and take him into custody. I wouldn't characterize it as the worst, but it is obviously an individual that went on a violent spree. Obviously, the incident earlier in the morning, and then it followed up this afternoon. And as you know, and you saw today, we put tremendous assets towards this to catch this individual because we knew he was a danger to the community and didn't want him out there.
The U.S. government will resume executing death row inmates for the first time since 2003. This officially ends a moratorium, even as the nation sees a broad shift away from capital punishment.
Today, the Attorney General of the United States announced that the federal government is going to begin to carry out the executions in cases where a federal death penalty has already been imposed and has gone through the entire appellate process. So in other words, it's a final decision, and there are executions that are ready. But for many, many years, the federal government hasn't executed anybody, well over a decade. There will probably be court challenges immediately, both to the procedures that may be in place and with regard to the individual persons who are ready for execution. One thing we know in the federal system as well as the state system is the impact on people of color is much more than the percentage of people of color in the population, called racial disparity. The number of African Americans far outnumbers their percentage in the general population. The same is true on federal death row with regard to people from Hispanic backgrounds.
There are some great family-friendly movies playing this weekend at the Mill. With more, here's Len Binning with another Movie Mill Minute.
Well, Disney's back at it. Dumbo, the live-action adaptation, stars Danny DeVito as the head of a struggling circus. Colin Farrell is tasked with taking care of a new elephant with extraordinary large ears. When they find out he can fly, it changes things for the circus.
You have something very rare. You have wonder. You have mystique. You have magic.
We have a family-friendly show starring Ryan Reynolds. It revolves around Detective Harry Goodman, who goes missing. His 21-year-old son is on the case and needs to find answers. He ends up partnering with none other than Detective Pikachu, who's voiced by Ryan Reynolds.
Whoever you are, you know how to use this.
Oh, jeez. Here we go.
I know, you can't understand me, but put down the stapler or I will electrocute you.
Lots of sunshine again and hot today, and a beautiful weekend is shaping up. Complete weather details coming up. Another beautiful day in the Windy City. Tonight, mainly clear with a low near 14. Tomorrow, just a few clouds and a high near 30. Sunday, lots of clear sky again with a high near 26. Monday, sunshine and a high of 27. Tuesday, even hotter with a high near 31 expected. Wednesday and Thursday, we should see highs near 30 on both days. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 26 and an average low of 11. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1984 at 36 degrees, and the record low was 4 in 1999. Sunrise was at 5:53, sunset at 9:23. Looking at tomorrow's national forecast now, expect a few clouds at 22 in Victoria, a good chance of showers at 24 for Vancouver. A mixture of sun and cloud at 26 for Calgary tomorrow. A slight chance of a thunder shower and a high at 24 for Edmonton. Sunny and a hot 31 is on tap for both Regina and Saskatoon on Saturday. Sunshine at 30 degrees for Winnipeg. A chance of showers at 31 for Toronto tomorrow. Just a few clouds at 31 for Ottawa. Expect lots of sunshine at 32 degrees for Montreal. Lots of summer heat in the Maritimes as well. Fredericton, New Brunswick should be mainly sunny at 31 tomorrow. Just a few clouds and 29 is expected in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Charlottetown, PEI will be mainly sunny at 28. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, it should be mainly sunny and 24 degrees tomorrow. Researchers with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada have developed a project to study invasive species before they arrive in Canada. Scientists in Saskatoon, Winnipeg, and Ottawa are generating data to develop models that can be used to predict where these species may establish themselves and become invasive to Canada. They say it is proactive research that could lead to early detection and help with eradicating any pests before they destroy crops. McDonald's newly modernized stores and growth in delivery is paying off for the world's largest hamburger chain. It is reporting the biggest increase in global sales at established locations during the second quarter in 7 years. The restaurant chain reported a 6.5% gain in sales at locations opened at least 13 months, which is the biggest gain since 2012. It was also its 16th consecutive bump in comparable store sales globally. Producers are beginning to feel the results of the Chinese ban on many Canadian products, including our canola, peas, and now China says there are issues with our meat. Leighton Kolk with Kolk Farms says China is making life tougher for beef producers like himself.
Pork is still moving. It's just under greater scrutiny and reduced speed of commerce. Beef has not been affected, but it's a cloud on the horizon for sure. Canola, as we talked about, is slowed down considerably. How will it affect it? These things take time to kind of get back to the ledger on the profit loss side of the ledger, but we are feeling it, and the agricultural community will feel the pain.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Kolk discussing some of the biggest challenges producers in Canada face right now, coming up after business news. Twitter is reporting strong user numbers and revenue even as it eliminates fake and robotic accounts on its platforms. The company says spam and suspicious behavior has dropped by 18% during the second quarter. Twitter's push to cut down fake accounts costs money. Its adjusted profit fell 36% to around $37 million US, around 5 cents per share. Revenue surged 18% to $841 million US, which was around $12 million more than Wall Street was looking for. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the United Conservative government says it is currently reviewing its finances as to whether or not it can afford to pay $100 million towards the new Highway 3 bridge in Lethbridge. Transportation Minister Rick McIver says even though the project was an NDP initiative, it'll still be considered as part of the overall capital planning process. A report on the government's finances should be made available by August the 15th. Many Canadians use payday loans to help us during a cash crunch. Up next, I chat with Brian Dykema from Cardis about the pros and cons of payday loans. That interview is coming up. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. Come have the finest in barbecue July 26th to the 28th at the Lethbridge Rotary Rib Fest taking place at Henderson Lake Park. Enjoy barbecued breakfast, lunch, and dinner, surrounded by entertainment and fun activities for the whole family. This year's event will showcase amazing barbecue teams from all over North America. Admission is free. For more information, visit the Lethbridge Rotary Rib Fest Facebook page. Southern Alberta Men's Ministry is hosting a barbecue and games day for men in the Lethbridge area on Saturday, August 24th at the John Martin Picnic Area in Pavan Park, beginning at 4 p.m. Enjoy an afternoon of hilarious fun and delicious food. Then, hear an inspiring message from Jerry Pullman. Tickets are 2 for $10. Buy one for yourself and a friend. For more information and tickets, contact Leslie at 403-327-4422 and follow Southern Alberta Men's Ministry on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Big Brothers Big Sisters in Lethbridge is searching for volunteers to mentor children and youth in their various programs. Volunteers commit anywhere from 1 hour a week to 1 full year. They have many kids on their wait list that are looking for a big brother or sister. Make a difference in a child's life and start something big. For more information, call 403-328-9355 or email info.leth@bigbrothersbigsisters.ca. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
The crops are on the ground, but now many farmers are hoping for a little bit of rain, right? Wouldn't that be nice? Where are we at when it comes to Canada's agriculture sector? To discuss this, we're joined at the desk right now by Leighton Kolk, owner of Kolk Farms and board member of the Alberta Cattle Feeders Association. Leighton, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you.
How many head of cattle do you have?
We have a one-time capacity of 20,000.
Well, that's a good size. So that's kind of a nice mid-size. And a lot of what, Black Angus?
A majority of Black and Red Angus, yeah, you bet.
That's pretty good. Now, it's been kind of dry, as you probably have noticed so far. How has that really impacted things, not only for beef producers, but those who are working with a lot of grains?
Yeah, we're seeing this drought kind of following up on another drought that we've had. Kind of the past 2 years have been extremely dry in the province and the Canadian kind of western provinces. So yeah, without irrigation, we'd be in real trouble in this area. Many of the prairie provinces are quite dry and crops are starting to struggle. We're seeing grain prices starting to creep up in anticipation of a poorer crop.
So now what about grain farmers potentially less of a crop? Would higher prices with a higher demand maybe offset that to some degree? What are your thoughts?
Well, a farm makes money by either growing a really big crop at reasonable prices, or in a case like this, they might grow a poorer crop, and for a farmer, then hopefully higher prices to offset that. Right now, we haven't lost the crop yet. It's early June. We could get some good rains and still make a very abundant crop yet in the prairie provinces. But if this drought would continue, it's gonna affect yield, and lower yield means less product to sell.
It's a little more expensive.
Which means often the price will go up. If it's either supply or demand. If there's less supply or greater demand, the prices go up.
How about crop insurance? One of the stories we had recently on Bridge City News was all of the hail. Last year in June was one of the worst on record across the prairie provinces when it came to hail damage. Now, hail, you weren't impacted so much here in southwestern Alberta, but you were, what, a few years ago?
Yeah, it's just hailstorms are just hit and miss sort of thing. So you might have a region 10 miles over that got hail and you didn't. But we didn't experience much hail damage last year. The year before, we definitely did on some of our crops.
How about crop insurance? How much does that help you, especially with severe drought conditions?
Yeah, crop insurance is there's two types of crop insurance. One is we can get hail insurance, which just kind of covers you for the incidence of hail, and you'll get paid out by how much damage there is. If there's also a whole crop insurance, it's called, and that one takes your yield into account. So if you have a greatly reduced yield for some reason, there is an insurance payout to help offset that. I guess the jury's out yet until we see how our crop produces this year, but most people would carry some of that whole crop insurance, which will hopefully offset some of the lack of production if it stays this dry.
Let's talk a bit about what's happening with China, their ban on Canadian canola. You have canola as well. Tell me about some of the challenges and if that ban lasts a little bit longer, maybe another 6 months to a year.
Right. So canola prices did take a hit when this trade
war
issue came up.
Sure.
Canola prices did hit the skids. They dropped a couple bucks a bushel. And then they kind of stabilized there. China is a very important, big client or customer of Canadian canola, but it's not the only customer. And China will continue to take canola oil. So it's not a complete disaster, but the longer it goes on, the more product kind of gets backed up in Canadian farmers' bins. They're not able to sell it, or not able to sell it for the price they need to break even or profit from. So I guess the longer it goes on, the tougher it's gonna be for a canola farmer. On the other hand, processors in Canada may benefit from that because they will crush more oil, they'll crush it faster, and be able to sell the oil to China and other countries.
Yeah, let me ask you about that then, Leighton. What are some of the other options for canola farmers?
So if they've already got canola in the bin from last year that's not sold, the only option is to either sell at a reduced price or store it until this goes away, this trade issue.
Does it have an expiry date? Like, can you only store it for so long?
No, canola you can store for quite a while. Your issues are you have to monitor that it won't start heating up because it's got moisture in it or something. And the other issue is if you've got bills to pay, canola in the bin doesn't pay the bills. So if you can afford to hold it, to have a bank forward you more money to pay your other bills and keep that in storage and wait, that works. Otherwise, they would sell at a reduced price just to get it moved.
How about the federal government's proposal of possibly allowing an increase in the amount of canola used in producing a biofuel? How much of a help would that really be to canola farmers?
You know, I won't claim to be an expert on this. It's a great idea to be able to use some byproducts to make fuel. To take canola and strictly try and push it through the biofuels, that funnel is pretty small right now. There's no way we can take the crop and try and put it into a biofuel. We just don't have the capacity to do that, and the economics are a little questionable. They're a little bit of a stretch to make the economics work, turning canola into diesel fuel.
So China has banned Canadian canola, peas, and they're doing a lot more inspections on beef and pork. This is one of our biggest trading partners. So this is really causing a dent in our economy, wouldn't you say?
It definitely, anytime you disrupt the marketplace, and when you're dealing with your second or third largest customer, which China is, we're going to feel the effects as a business, as an agricultural community. The pork, having said that, pork is still moving. It's just under greater scrutiny and reduced speed of commerce. Beef has not been affected, but it's a cloud on the horizon for sure. Canola, as we talked about, is slowed down considerably. How will it affect it? These things take time to kind of get back to the ledger on the profit loss side of the ledger, but we are feeling it, and the agricultural community will feel the pain.
An Alberta contingent went to Seoul, South Korea, and Tokyo, Japan, to look at possibly other markets. We could bring our beef, our pork, our canola to. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, anytime you can take dependency off of one market. So America is still our biggest market.
Right.
China is our number 2, number 3, depending which products we're talking about. Whenever we can kind of spread your customer base, widen it out, it reduces some risk. So you're not reliant just on China or just on U.S.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
There you go. There's a good farm analogy right there. But
what about the carbon tax? Jason Kenney, our premier, has promised, he delivered. He's repealed the provincial carbon tax, waiting for the federal one to kick in now. But how much is that helping profits for you?
I guess it just happened, so I have no sense of measurement yet, other than it's reduced some of our fuel costs right up front, as with anybody else. So we have transportation costs, we have semis, tractors, trucks on the road all the time. So there is a small benefit from that. I could see possibly some benefit from electrical, natural gas reductions as we get back into winter or into heavy pumping season for irrigation. Because even though there's not a carbon tax on electricity, we know darn well that it has caused the electrical price to go up because some of the issues around coal burning and emissions. So will we save some money? Possibly. It's not the large part of our sort of income expense statement, but I guess it will have a small effect, yeah.
I've noticed that there's an increase in popularity right now with veggie burgers. The almost beef, almost meat, right? And right, yeah, that's one of it, sure, whatever you want to call it, right? So how do you handle that? How do you deal with that?
I guess I would say choice. A consumer likes choice. If they want choice, I guess give them choice. The Beyond Meat, the plant-based burger that we hear about, some of that marketplace will be actually to a whole new market, which is people that don't presently eat burgers made out of real beef. So that marketplace won't really affect beef sales, in my opinion. It may help McDonald's or A&W or whatever, but what it might affect is where do we go in the future? Does meat get a percentage of it get replaced by veggie, burger, plant-based? But I suppose it's something we better keep our eye on as a beef industry. But it's still hard it's hard to enjoy fake meat when you've had the real stuff. It's just.
Well, I'm a big believer. I love my steak. I got to tell you, my barbecued steak. Leighton, let me ask you, how are beef farmers really responding to recent consumer demand for hormone-free and antibiotic-free beef?
So that's a bit of a misconceived concept already right there. There's no such thing as hormone-free. There's no such edible product on earth that's hormone-free, because hormones is used in everything. Hormones is how plants grow. It's how biological systems work, how cells divide. Hormones are always present. So an antibiotic-free, that's another one. There is no antibiotics in meat sold in Alberta or in Canada or in North America. For that part, I would hope the world.
So I've seen a certain fast food restaurant, that's been their big part of their marketing and advertising. We have antibiotic-free beef, antibiotic-free beef, and I'm like, wait a minute, isn't that with all beef producers, antibiotic-free?
Yeah. So that good point. It is antibiotic-free, and there's no such thing as hormone-free. Now, raised without any use of antibiotics or raised without any use of additional hormone, I guess that's a claim. There again, it's a choice a consumer can make. Does it change the safety of the food or the value of the food or the health benefits? No. There's no measurable way to tell the difference. So it really comes down to if a consumer has a certain choice that they think they can vote with their wallet, then they're allowed to do that, I guess.
How can you put our viewers' minds at ease with the potential of a mad cow disease? We don't have to be as concerned about that now.
Yeah, like a thing like BSE was a we've learned a lot from that, and there's been just a staggering amount of food safety rules put in place from 2003 when we discovered one in Canada. We something like BSE has basically been eliminated from Canada. It got imported from another country, from England, from Europe, but so that's how it got here. We definitely didn't see it run out of control here. We found a few cases of it, but the rules in place today, basically banning all meat and bone meal, blood meal used in any beef production, has basically eliminated any chance of that moving forward or happening again.
Right. Cannabis became legal, recreational use cannabis, last October, and multi-billion-dollar empire now. It's huge. You can't stop it. Are some farmers considering, you know what, forget canola, forget wheat, forget barley, I'm going with cannabis. You know, that I can make a little bit more money that way. Have you heard any of that?
I don't know of anybody doing that.
Okay.
It's my understanding is it's not something you would go out and farm 100 acres of this product. It's going to be in a greenhouse controlled environment.
Right.
Almost more of a horticultural or a greenhouse type of business than a farm, large acre prairie provinces sort of business, I would say.
Okay, so keep up with the canola.
You know, we're going to probably keep with the legal stuff, or the stuff that used to not be legal. It used to be always legal. Yeah, you know, canola, corn, wheat, barley, beets, potatoes.
What's hardiest here in southwestern Alberta? Potatoes, corn?
You know, without irrigation,
Yeah.
it would be the grasses and the wheats and barleys.
Okay.
Because we have irrigation, potatoes, canola, beets, sugar beets, hybrids, canola seed, corn. These are all, because we have irrigation, we can grow these high value crops. The other ones are basically they're a staple, but they're a low value compared to these other crops that I just mentioned.
Leighton Kolk, owner of Kolk Farms, a board member of the Alberta Cattle Feeders Association. Thanks a lot for joining me here in studio.
You're welcome. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night. Some provinces in Canada have managed to shrink the number of payday loan shops in operation. A new report, however, by the think tank Cardis says that may not mean it's good news for consumers. They may not be better off. Brian Dykema is Program Director for Work and Economics at Cardis, and he gives us his thoughts on payday loan lenders. Brian, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, for any viewers who may not be familiar with payday loan lenders, what has been the problem that consumers were running into?
Right. Payday loans are small loans, just to be clear, so that people even know what they are. They're small loans, and they tend to be loans that are really expensive. In Canada, we have this thing called the Usury Act, which sets a limit on how much interest can be charged, and that limit is 60% per year. The only exception, though, are these small loans that are $1,500 or less, and that are for terms of 60 days or less. So they're very small, very short term loans, but they're very expensive. So they're exempt from that 60%, and so it was set to provinces to regulate them. And in Alberta, for instance, the rate used to be 130 or 839%. So you get a bit of a feel for the cost of that. That's on an annualized basis, but most people were taking them out for about 10 days or so.
Yeah, I'm wondering how can people even afford that, right? But maybe for the 10-day period, it's not so bad. Not too much of a hit.
That's exactly right. And that was the way they were sort of promoted, right? That these are small dollar loans that are expensive to provide. And so the costs are expensive, but really you're not paying the full $839. That was the argument, at least, that people made. The reality is, though, that people did. It ends up taking a lot of money from people who had cash flow shortages. That was the real issue for them. It's not that people didn't have the money, it's that they didn't have the money at the right time. And that was some of the challenges with payday lending. They didn't have the money at the right time, and it meant they had to borrow and borrow and borrow again. And for some, that led to a bit of a spiral of debt.
So, Brian, obviously the high interest rates, people can't afford that for the most part. The Alberta and Ontario governments recognized the issue, and a couple of years ago they made some serious changes. What does it look like today?
Yeah, that's right. It's significantly different today, actually, and it's significantly different as a result of legislation. And some of that's good and some of that's bad. We actually produced a report recently which gave the government grades on some of their regulation changes, and the range is sort of from A to an F. One of the things, though, that we gave them an F on was on those interest rate changes. In Alberta, it moved from 839%. So it used to be about $23 per $100 borrowed was the rate in Alberta. And in 2016, the government changed it to $15 per 100. So it's a massive drop from 839% annually to 547. So that's a big drop. And you think, okay, that's great. It must be really, really great for consumers. But if you think of it on a per loan basis, it's not actually that much. The 839% would cost you, for a $300 loan, it would cost you $69. So that's a lot. It's more expensive than a line of credit or a credit card. But under the new terms, it'll cost you $45. So it's still quite a bit. It doesn't actually deal with that real problem, which is that big cash flow crunch. And we found that's been a challenge for consumers.
And I guess a big issue as well is the fact that the borrower is required to pay back the entire amount in a shorter period of time.
Exactly. That's what we said was the real issue. The real issue, the interest rate is high, of course, and we actually recommended using some data that we got from firms which provided payday loans. We got them because they were publicly available. We were able to determine that. We thought the lower end of the threshold was $17 per 100. But the real challenge is not the interest rate. It is bad, but it's not the real interest rate. It's the fact that you have to pay that all back at once in one big payment. And that's the challenge, right? So if you and I are stuck for cash flow on Thursday, the fact that we're paying $345 rather than $369 doesn't really deal with the issue, which is that big $300 chunk.
Does that create a vicious cycle then? Are people borrowing to pay some of the other loans?
That's exactly right. That's exactly what ends up happening in many cases. And so that's what we recommended, that they actually be looking more at the terms so that people could spread those payments over longer periods of time. What's interesting is that does sort of appear to have been what happens, and we'll talk a little bit about why I'm hedging so much. But it does appear to be that the industry as a whole has moved away from payday loans and into what these longer term loans, which I think is both good and bad, and we can talk about that as well.
So are people getting a little more desperate for credit? They may end up more dependent on some of their hard-to-regulate online lenders?
That absolutely is one of the things that we're concerned about. We do know, for instance, that the Alberta market for payday lending has declined significantly. There used to be 230 stores in 2015 before the legislation changed, and Alberta lost 30% of them. There's 165 now, and some of the bigger providers have gotten out of payday lending altogether. So some people are saying that's a victory, and it may be, but the reality is we don't know. We don't actually know if people are forced to take more expensive loans, if they're just living with sort of bounce checks and things like that, which cost more money. We know that the industry has shrunk. We know that options for consumers have shrunk, but we don't know whether consumers are better or worse off, which we think is one of the major problems.
So Brian, what percentage of people do you think really prefer to deal with brick and mortar lenders?
Yeah, I can't give an exact percentage, but what I can tell you is that in study after study about why people go to payday loan stores, they like the personal contact. The fact that there's somebody there, the fact that they can speak to somebody and get that loan, to get that cash right away, is one of the key reasons why people go to the stores themselves. It actually contributes to the cost as well. So we don't have exact percentages per se, but we do know that. But people like to go there. They like to be seen as a customer.
So what are your thoughts on banks and credit unions stepping up to provide better, lower-cost alternatives to payday loans?
Yeah, we actually think that that's an area for growth and exploration. We actually lauded the governments, both in Alberta and in Ontario, for partnering with credit unions and saying that, look, we want to look to you guys to offer those alternatives. We had high hopes for that, and I would say that we still have high hopes. But if you look at the data and look at whether or not those hopes have been fulfilled, we've got a pretty long way to go. In Alberta, for instance, only 0.04% of all loans of payday loans are offered by credit unions, and that adds up to about 0.09% of the total market. So we're talking about a very, very small sliver, which I'm not despairing of yet. I think there's actually a lot more room for credit unions to be aware of this issue and to begin offering greater value products. And to be quite frank, I think the banks need to do that as well. Banks have invested heavily into corporate social responsibility programs. But what we would say to them is, look, it's time to start looking right in your value chain and whether you can offer financial services to those who don't have access to the same type of credit.
So why is there such a need for emergency loans to begin with? Is there just a little too much month at the end of the money?
Yeah, that's often the case. If you look at the demographic of who uses payday loans, it's that the person that we like to talk about is Alice. It's somebody who's asset limited, income constrained, and employed. It's people who are working, who aren't poor, but who are just on the edges, who have a chance to move up or down. And so often these people are actually quite good managers of money. There's a sort of a myth that people in that area of the income stream aren't good, but the reality is they're quite astute at budgeting. And what ends up happening is that emergencies happen, breaks go, you get sick for a day and you miss a shift, and you're just short a little bit of cash. And most people are able to make it up in the next round. So that's the need. There's a real need for credit. And what we've also discovered is that there's quite a bit actually of inequality in being able to access that credit.
Now, one of the issues you also discovered as well, Brian, is that the provinces gave municipalities the right to limit the number of loan shops in certain areas of the city. Now, the problem is that essentially causes a complete lack of competition, so the interest rates remain high?
Yeah, absolutely. We've experienced that in Ontario, particularly in some of the bigger cities like Toronto and Hamilton. They put a hard cap on payday lenders in the place, which on the one hand you says, great, we're keeping these high cost lenders out. On the other hand, what you're doing is actually providing the stores that do exist there with a state-backed monopoly on the payday lending market. And as everybody knows, monopolies are bad for consumers. They make stores lazy, they increase prices. So what we're saying to cities that are pursuing that policy is to look, don't do that. Don't do that. Focus instead on vulnerable populations. If you're going to use those powers, and we think there is some way to use them well, focus on populations like those who have trouble with addictions or with mental health. Put a bit of a bubble around areas where those populations are prevalent and move the stores away from that. But don't limit competition, because competition is good for consumers.
Are provincial and municipal governments willing to make some changes?
I think so. I actually think there is a bit of an openness to this. It was an experiment to begin with. There hasn't really been any changes in payday lending until this last recent bout since the 90s or since 2006. Sorry. So it's been one of those things that's an ongoing experiment. I think part of what we're trying to do with our data is to say to the governments, look, let's make sure that what we're doing here is good for consumers. And I think that's one of the challenges. Governments actually don't know whether it's good or not for consumers. And so that's one of the things we're saying to them. Let's measure that before we make any big changes.
Now, apparently the cap which has been placed on these high interest rates actually puts some of the payday loan shops in a tough position financially with their overhead and could potentially cause some to close down, which limits competition. And as you and I know, Brian, competition is usually good for the consumer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one of the real challenges that we found. I mean, in Alberta, 30% of the payday lenders have shut down. That's a major drop. Ontario, we saw the same numbers. We also saw not quite 30%, but we saw a significant drop. I think it was definitely in the double digits. Another thing that we've noted is that there's been a consolidation amongst the biggest firms. It's the smallest mom and pop type shops that have been affected. And so the reality is we've seen a decline in options for people who already have very few options for credit. And so you ask yourself, how are we winning here? Are we winning here at all? The answer is we don't know. We do know that declining options are not healthy. And I think that what we really need to see is a deeper focus on whether this actually affects the consumers. One of the recommendations from our papers is that both Alberta and Ontario renew their study. Instead of focusing on the producers, instead of saying how many shops do we have, let's actually focus on the people who use them. Where do they go for credit now that the stores are gone? Are they still finding challenges meeting cash crunches? What options are they turning to? And after hearing that, let's actually put some solutions that help them, not harm them.
Now, your report also uncovered another significant shortcoming in Alberta's approach to payday loans. The province has little idea of whether it has actually helped consumers use fewer payday loans. Why do they not know?
Absolutely, they have no idea. I mean, what we do know is what's happening to the stores themselves, the providers, and that we can sort of extrapolate from that. But what we can't determine is how consumers are behaving. We noted in our first paper that we called "Banking on the Margins" that to some people, payday loans are a bad choice, but they're a better choice than the alternatives. For instance, in some banks, you'll get an NSF fee, which is $40 or something like that. And if that hits twice, all of a sudden you're up to $80 really, really quickly, right? Which is even higher than the $69 that a payday loan. So we just noticed that there are options out there, but often they're more expensive. But the reality is the Alberta government and the Ontario government, for that matter, and all the other governments, this has been massive changes across the country, haven't actually been focusing on the consumer at all. It's been entirely focused on the producer, which we think is just the wrong way to go about making economic policy. Let's focus on the people who matter, which are the people who are on these economic margins, and let's focus on trying to find ways to enable them to grow their credit scores, to sort of save better. And governments simply haven't been doing that. So we would absolutely recommend that governments focus more on consumers.
So we have a situation where short-term, high-interest loans are becoming a little bit cheaper, but now they are becoming less accessible. Any other solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your analysis is correct there. Couple of solutions. One is that there actually may be good things. I know that a lot of payday loan firms have switched to offering term loans. These are things, effectively a line of credit. They're still expensive, but for a person who's using it for small dollar loans, it may be better. And so that's a positive thing if they're being used, but what we don't know is if they're being used or not. And so that would be one of the recommendations. Let's find ways to measure that. Other ways to do it, we've talked quite a bit about credit unions. I still think there's lots of room for them to do unique things, to bring them in, to bring consumers who need this stuff in and help them build their assets and provide that sort of credit that they don't have access to anywhere else. And then finally, there's lots of interesting work being done in the financial sector, which is trying to lower the costs of these transactions to provide people with loans a better alternative. And I know that in Alberta, there's a few of those as well. So those are, I think, a few options for going forward.
Ryan Dykemas with the think tank Artis. Thanks a lot for joining me from Hamilton, Ontario today.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Great talking to you.